All right, everybody. My name is Van Holden, and I am excited to be with you this morning to discuss our second professional development session of the second semester here of the second half of the 25-26 school year, as we take kind of a deep dive into graduation rate and high school student success indicator information. With me today from the department, we've got Era Roberts, who's our new accountability program manager, and Wendy Stevens, who is one of our leaders in our IT department. We've got kind of a similar format to what we did in our previous session, if you were able to join us for cohorts in January, in terms of how we are running our program today. But we hope that you'll find it informative. We had about 145 folks join us yesterday, and hoping to reach just as many folks today and communicate some information. But I want to go over a few logistics with you as folks are joining the call. First, we invited several hundred folks to these calls. And due to the number of folks we've invited, we had to put some logistical pieces in place to make this work. So one of the issues with having as many invites as we did and not doing a sign up because we didn't want to create another barrier for people to be here. But one of those things is when you have several hundred people who might be on a call, you have to restrict the chat a little bit so we can actually keep up with what's happening in the chat. So we went with a model here that allows for question and answer. So you can use the question and answer section. You can post a question to us and we'll respond. Yesterday, we were able to respond during the meeting to folks because we've got, again, a team of people who are here facilitating today's session. But if you're unable to get an answer from us today, you can always follow up with us. We're going to have our contact information at the end. And we've also got a survey at the end, just like we did in January, where you can, if you weren't able to get your question answered, if there's something else that you thought of, you can always just message us that way. It's the kind of last option there for you to contact us and pose a specific question. But again, we do have the question and answer feature enabled, so you can post a question to us. We really like how that works because it allows us to kind of respond directly to the question and things don't kind of get lost in the chat function for us. Of course, we do have cameras disabled and microphones disabled, again, to make sure if we have too many people on the call that the bandwidth is okay and we don't have any issues that cause delays in what we're trying to present or what we're trying to share. So I did want to make sure everybody was clear on those logistical features for us. This session is geared towards district leaders, and we're going to be recording it and posting it online and sharing the resources so folks can distribute as well. But the focus here is for district leaders and thinking through key pieces of our accountability system. As I've mentioned, today's session is really going to focus on graduation rates and high school student success indicator, which are two critical metrics for the school report card. We're going to start with an overview of what are the accountability rules for graduation rate and high school student success indicator. Then we're going to be talking about the coding requirements, how we can verify our data, what we should do if data looks inaccurate. We're going to allow a few minutes of planning time, and then we're going to go through some next steps as well. I will say our first session that we did in January was about 65, 70 minutes. Yesterday, when we ran it through, we knew we were going to be over that. We ended up at about 80 minutes yesterday. So less than an hour and a half. But we think all of the content here is really important and essential for schools and districts to have. So we're keeping it about that pace today. So please anticipate about 80 minutes. Towards the end of that 80 minutes, I may have to step away to go to a separate presentation that I'm running this morning. And when I do that, Era Roberts, our accountability program manager, will be taking over towards the end for me. So just be aware of that. She's going to do a great job with it then. First up, I did want to remind everybody of some cohort information. Of course, we spent a whole professional development session on that in January. But as a reminder, this is a critical piece for graduation rate and high school student success. So if your cohort data isn't correct, you're going to have issues with graduation rate and high school student success. And a cohort in the accountability context is a group of students who entered a high school in the United States for the first time on or prior to the 45th day of a given school year. Each one of those pieces is its own little phrase there that comes together to tell us exactly who should be in or who should not be in a specific cohort. And the 9GR, that cohort is the student's ninth grade code. It tells us which high school cohort a student should be in for accountability purposes. Wendy's team made this fantastic flowchart, which walks us through how a 9GR is assigned. I find this to be a great resource for schools and districts as they consider what the appropriate 9GR is for a student. Of course, we have students transferring in at all times in any school or district or throughout our state, and each one has a unique situation. So this tool is intended to help you think through what to do from assigning a 9GR standpoint. I also would point us back to the cohort progression maintenance manual. This is a critical document for looking at what are the requirements for documentation, what are the rules surrounding cohort entry and exit. So please make sure that you're checking out those resources. We covered them in January, so we're not going to be going in depth on them today, but I do want to remind you of those things because the understanding of those pieces is essential when we start looking at high school report card ratings. Graduation rate is worth 19% of a high school's overall rating, and that actually increases to 24% if the school has fewer than 20 multilingual learners in the multilingual learners progress indicator. So between 19 and 24% of the rating for a high school comes from graduation rate. High school student success, which is the other part we're talking about today, is worth 12% of a high school's overall rating. So just between these two metrics alone, which are heavily influenced by the cohorts, you're looking at 31 to 36% of a high school's overall rating. So roughly a third of the rating comes from these two pieces today. And so it is critical that our data be correct here if you want to have success on your school report card for any of your high schools. So a lot of this information comes directly from the accountability manual. You can see there's the web address for it on down below, and we'll be referring to it throughout this first part on graduation rates. But the graduation rate is the indicator that reports the percent of students who graduate from high school within 4 full school years of their initial enrollment, unless the student meets one of the approved reasons for removal. So we're looking at within 4 full school years. We often get questions about what if they graduate in 3 years or 3.5 years. That's within 4 full school years. Okay, so the graduation rate is inclusive of students who graduate prior to the end of that 4th year. The graduation rate is calculated based on the number of students who earned a diploma divided by the total number of students included in the 4-year graduation cohort. For the 25-26 year, we're looking at students who have a 9GR of 23. Those are the students in the 4-year graduation cohort, 9GR 23. That means they entered a high school in the United States for the first time during that 22-23 school year. All students in the graduation cohort for the current year, as defined by their 9th grade code, are included as assigned to the school of their enrollment on the 180th day. A student who's no longer enrolled and does not have an approved reason for removal is still included in the cohort of their last school of enrollment. And that part is critical too. If there is not an approved reason for removal from the cohort, the student is still included in the cohort of their last school of enrollment. Now, the process for taking the graduation rate and converting it into a rating involves several steps, and I'm going to highlight one that I was not aware of until a few years into my tenure as an accountability director in one of our local districts. So the first thing is pretty straightforward. We determine the 4-year graduation cohort. It's basic stuff, right? The second part is we determine the number of students in the cohort who earned a high school diploma. Again, very straightforward. We then divide the number in step 2 by the number from step 1. So we have a numerator and a denominator. Again, that should seem very straightforward. We multiply that by 100. That takes the number and gives us a number that's above 1 usually, and then we subtract 50 from that product. Now, this is a key part that I was unaware of until we started looking at subgroups. Okay, because in our district, all the high schools were well above a 50 for the overall graduation rate. But sometimes you run into situations where a subgroup might actually be below 50 at a specific school on graduation rate. And what happens here is we now subtract 50. And if the difference is less than 0, we then set that graduation rate indicator is now a 0. It doesn't go below 0, but it becomes a 0. We then divide the product in step 5 by 50, and we multiply the quotient from step 6 by 19, round to the nearest hundredth, and that gives us our rating points out of 19. The final step is we go to the table 17, which we'll see on the next slide. Per that table, any school with a graduation rate of less than 70% is deemed unsatisfactory. Any high school which exceeds the state goal of 90% is deemed excellent. Okay, so here is the conversion piece. You can see that's out of 19 points. So 15.2 to 19 gets you excellent, and anything below 7.59 points or 7.59 points or below is deemed unsatisfactory. But that's the process we use to calculate graduation rate. The next part gets into high school student success, and I'll just take a moment here to celebrate this metric as well as the fifth-year student success piece that we're going to be talking about. Back in 2018, when we first moved to this new accountability system, a lot of our high school ratings were very dependent on the, or exclusively dependent on the students who were in that graduating cohort, their fourth year, right? So even you had graduation rate, which was tied up in that, college and career readiness, but even the EOC scores didn't count until the student was in their fourth year of high school for a variety of reasons. And I think everybody recognized at the time that there's a lot more work that occurs in a high school than just in that graduating cohort. And our accountability system should be able to reflect some of that work that's occurring in a student's first year of high school, second year of high school, third year of high school, right? So that's a critical adjustment that's been made just in the last few years. And one of those adjustments here is that on track to graduate piece. So now we have a way to kind of recognize and in some cases celebrate some of the great work that's occurring in those first 3 years of high school that leads to outstanding graduation rates. And here's how the on track to graduate piece works. It's one component of our high school student success indicator. And we look at the percentage of students who were in their first 3 years out of high school and are on track to graduate within 4 years. And what does that look like? Well, in South Carolina, you have to have 24 high school credits to earn a diploma. 4 of those credits must be English and 4 must be math. There are other requirements as well, right? And this PowerPoint is intended to go into what those requirements are. But the on-track metric takes those ideas, 24 credits, let's divide that by 4, that's 6 credits a year. 4 math, 4 English, let's divide that by 4, that's 1 math and 1 English per year. So you are considered to be on track to graduate if in each successive year of high school you've earned 6 total credits, 1 of which is math and 1 of which is English. So for this year, we're looking at the 9GR 26, which is the students who entered a high school in the United States for the first time on or before the 45th day of the 25-26 school year. And the 9GR 26, they must have earned 1 math, 1 English, 6 total credits. Students in their second year, that's the 9GR 25, must have earned 12 credits, 2 math, 2 English. Students in their third year, that's the 9GR 24, they must have earned 3 math, 3 English for a total of 18 credits. If they have done those things, they will be considered to be on track. You can see on the next slide, I've just taken that information and written it out differently, depending on which one works for you, but the content is the same there. 6 credits per year, 1 of which must be in math, 1 of which must be in English, and then you must continue to accrue at that rate up to your third year where you've earned 18. Now, any valid high school credit listed in the course code database, which is linked here, that has been earned by the student at any time in the past can contribute to the 6, 12, or 18 credits required to consider to be on track. However, because the on track to graduate measures whether students are on track to graduate with a diploma, with a regular high school diploma, within 4 years of starting high school, only the credits listed as satisfying an English graduation credit can contribute to the required English credits. Only courses listed as satisfying a mathematics graduation credit can contribute to the required math credits. That is critical here. They must be seen as courses there that satisfy that English graduation credit. So be very conscientious of that as you're looking at which students have earned which credits and are they on track to graduate. The second piece of high school student success is another one that really captures more of the work that's happening in our high schools. So for a long time, if you didn't graduate in 4 years, we weren't giving you credit in the accountability model. If you earned a GED, you weren't getting credit in the accountability model. And if you didn't earn an employability credential, you weren't getting credit there. And I'm thankful for our partners at the Education Oversight Committee for their leadership of our accountability system and policy and pushing to see some of these success stories get represented. There's sometimes the hardest work that's occurring in our high schools, ensuring a student ends up with a diploma, even if it doesn't occur within 4 years, ensuring a student earns a GED if that's the right pathway for them, or the employability credential. And so the accountability model has made a shift in the last few years where we now recognize those pieces, and it's included here with the 5th-year student success and the high school student success indicator overall. And again, as I just mentioned, this is looking at the percent of students who have earned either that regular high school diploma, earned a GED, or the South Carolina high school employability credential within 5 years of starting high school. Again, that 5-year piece is the key. Students who were reported in the grad rate indicator for the prior year, so we take that 4-year cohort from the prior year, that is who becomes the cohort group for the 5th-year student success rating, okay, for the high school where they were included. We do remove students, and those reasons are listed here. For example, if between the end of the student's 4th year and the end of the student's 5th year of what should have been their time in one of our high schools, if they pass away, they immigrate, or they transfer to a prison or juvenile facility following adjudication, and we have properly removed documentation, we will remove them from the cohort as a properly documented transfer for that 5th year. Students shall not be added to the cohort during the 5th year. Okay, so please be aware of that information for the 5th year cohort. We then take the calculation process. We determine the number of students assigned to the high school's 1st year cohort according to the guidelines and procedures described in the grad rate section. We determine the number of students included in step 1 who were considered to be on track. And we've already covered what the definition is there. Step 3, we determine the number of students assigned to the high school's 2nd year cohort according to the guidelines and procedures in the grad rate section. And we determine the number of students included in step 3 who are considered to be on track. So step 1 and step 3 provide us with a denominator. Steps 2 and step 4 provide us with a numerator. Step 5 and step 6 work the same way. We determine the number of students assigned to the 3rd year cohort, and we determine the number of students included in step 5 who are considered to be on track to graduate. So again, step 5 gives us a denominator. Step 6 gives us a numerator. Step 7, we determine the number of students who were included in the graduation rate for the high school on their report cards. And we determine the number of students included in step 7 who obtained a successful high school credential or high school outcome, which includes the credential, includes a GED, includes a regular high school diploma within 5 years of their first time in a U.S. high school. And then we total the numbers from the even numbered steps. Okay, step 2, step 4, step 6, step 8. Those are our numerators. We total those up, and then we divide that by the denominator steps 1, 3, 5, and 7. You subtract 0.5 from step 10. We multiply by 24 times step 11. And then the product that we get there is rounded to the nearest hundredth. And then we look at how that number matches up to the ratings table on table 20. And that tells us what the rating for that school should be on this specific indicator. Okay. Now, again, this kind of matches up with the grad rate one, where if you're below 70%, that is unsatisfactory. If you're above 90%, that is deemed excellent. So that's how all of that piece works, okay, in terms of the ratings methodology and processes there. I'm going to unshare my screen. We should have Wendy Stevens on the call, and we're in separate locations today due to our complicated schedules. So Wendy's going to be taking over here in just a second, and she is going to share her screen and share her PowerPoint so she can advance to the slides. And then when Wendy's complete, I'll take back over. So let's give us 1 second as we transition. Wendy, are you there?
Hey there, Van. I sure am. Can you all hear me? Awesome. All right. I got a thumbs up. I'm going to share screen here in just a second, and then I'm going to talk to you guys about coding requirements. Bear with me as I minimize this and maximize this piece. All right, we should all see the coding requirements slide. For this portion, I get to talk with you about how to make sure that the data elements needed to ensure that your metrics are accurate are coded appropriately. And I'm excited to go through that with you. It is a little bit more than the cohort elements that we discussed last time. So we're going to roll up our sleeves here and look at what these elements are. So the critical fields in PowerSchool that you're going to need to think about have to do with the categories in today's training that Van has already talked with you about from the policy side. So we have graduation rate, and we'll look at the elements related to that today. We have high school student success indicator for on track to graduate, and we have the high school student success indicator for fifth year success. And before I move forward talking about the fields that we'll focus on today, as Van also alluded to, this is really also building on top of that knowledge around who is in your cohort. So remember that those fields for 9GR and denominator that we discussed in the previous training are still important for that. And we do have a recording of that available if anyone was not able to join us. So feel free to reach out if you need that recording and we'll direct you to it. All right, so for graduation rate, today we're going to look at the diploma earned field, and there are two values there for graduation rate that could be valid values that you might need to know about, or that you do need to know about. We've also got the graduation date, and we'll talk about how that comes into play. For high school student success indicator on track to graduate, you're also certainly going to want to make sure that you know that course codes are a part of this in terms of the data that's looked at. So Van, I love what he put together for you in some of the previous slides that he's gone through today to talk you through over time what courses you need to be thinking about for your students, and a great way to check to make sure that you have good course codes and good course numbers associated with those so that they're easily identified in the data and associated correctly for your students. We have this resource called Satchel that's actually a database that was put together by Nicole Ivory, who is our subject area expert on our course codes. And this database, you can download files out of it so you can slice and dice and look at what you need to, but it's a great way to check and see what would the appropriate course codes be for what Van has talked with you about. And then when those are set up in PowerSchool each year, you'll know that you're on the right track. We'll also talk about this field seeking diploma type, and there's some nuance around that, but I'm including it here. And I'll explain that to you why when we get to it. And then high school student success indicator for fifth year success. For that one, as Van mentioned, the employability credential is important, and we're excited about that. I will talk with you about the key fields there, what you absolutely need to make sure is coded and why. And then adult ed and GED, or high school equivalency related fields. So this is a little bit different in this case than let's say if you had a student earn an adult ed diploma by the time of the typical graduation date, right? So this is going to be for fifth year success, and we'll talk about that as well. All right, so starting with graduation date, graduation rate. How does the PowerSchool coding apply? The students who graduate are identified as follows. PowerSchool values coded for the diploma earned field, values of F or Z, are going to be relevant there. And the graduation date field would also need to be filled out for students coded as F, which would be students who are earning that regular South Carolina high school diploma, or values coded for the adult education graduation date field for students who in their diploma earned field have Z. So Z would be that adult education diploma. Remember that the on-time graduation cohort, as Van reminded you all, for a given school year consists of students who received their 9GR values 3 school years before. So for example, for school year 25-26, the on-time 9GR cohort would be 23, representing the students first enrolled in 9th grade during the 22-23 school year. And for this next bullet that I have here, it's just another reminder that that denominator field that we discussed in our last training is also really important. It still comes into play for your cohort. So the graduation cohort is adjusted by subtracting students who are coded with the value of no, and the field labeled student should remain in cohort for the denominator on the cohort maintenance worksheet page in PowerSchool. And remember that values of yes or blank in that field indicate cohort inclusion. So that's the last little reminder that I'll read through on that here. Again, please revisit our cohort training if you need to, but those are still important to remember. Right, and a note here again, just to make sure everyone understands this piece, because we do sometimes get questions about this, and I understand why. Folks want to make sure that they really understand um, this piece in particular when it becomes relevant. So if the student earns a high school diploma, so not a GED or a high school equivalency diploma from the adult education program or an adult education program by the expected on-time graduation date of their original school's cohort, the student is counted positively in their previous school's graduation rate. So please keep that in mind. And just to kind of tie this back to what we just saw on the previous slide here, this is where that value of Z in that diploma earned field would come into play. If you have a student earning a high school diploma from an adult ed program by the expected on-time graduation date. All right. And a couple other reminders. Van has already gone through this information, but as we move forward looking at the relevant PowerSchool fields, remember that high school student success indicator reports the percent of students who've either earned a regular high school diploma, a South Carolina high school employability credential, or a GED. And again, that denominator field and the IGR for your cohort continue to be important. All right, let's get into some specifics. You're going to see on this slide that I have put a purple box and a big purple arrow next to a couple of fields. And I've done that on a couple of slides to really highlight for you what is truly important for the metric. A bit of a risky move, but I did this nonetheless. I've also included a couple of other fields that I want to point out to you. And they are not necessarily looked at for the metric per se, but the reason I included these additional ones is because if anyone should be new to this work, you might want to know that if you're not also thinking about these other fields, chances are you might actually not have very clean data in the required field for the metric. And so what we've observed over time is that if you're thinking about all of these, chances are the data quality for what you need in the end will be better. But I also want to clarify what is needed for your metrics and your calculations, if that makes sense. All right. So let's take a look at this slide here. For graduation rate, your required fields are on that South Carolina student information page for the fields that we're talking about here today. So we have diploma earned. We'll start right there in the middle. And graduation date. And these must be correct by that 180-day data submission deadline for your final metrics. So for PowerSchool data this year, the date that we're looking at for having all data published by 7 p.m., you would want to have that done by, right now it looks like June 14th. A little caveat that if that does change, we would make that clear, that information clear and available. But just for an example, if that ends up being June 14th, that would mean that we would then have your data by a June 15th deadline. So if the state needs the data by June 15th, you would want to have it published up, and we'll talk about publishing. But the data that you would be really, really wanting to make sure is accurate is this diploma earned and graduation date. Now, as you can see here, I've given you the field label that you'll see in PowerSchool on the page. And then for those who might need to know it, the actual table and PowerSchool field in the database in PowerSchool where that data is stored, that might actually become important. So I want to make that available to you here. So you can see we have what we call the extended student table in that table.field bullet. So you have S_SC_STU_X is the table where that data is stored in PowerSchool. And then you have a dot, and then the field is diploma earned code. And then for the graduation date, it's grad date. Now, the two of these together are really important. We actually have the graduation date mapped in our system to a required field. So there's actually some logic that anticipates for students Should they be seeking a diploma, what that graduation date would be. You want to make sure it's accurate for your students. That date alone, therefore, is of course not enough to say, yes, this student has earned a diploma, right? It's just the date. And you do want to make sure it's accurate for your students. The diploma earned is also going to be really important to say, yes, the student earned a diploma, and this field will be looked at. So you would want to make sure that by day 180, by that deadline, that that data is accurately coded. We know that districts have, because of their size and different workflows and the way that they need to operate, the exact moment when that might get coded might vary a little bit. But I will just say that if you're being proactive and right at the end you're saying, okay, we think that these students are going to have it earned, we're going to go ahead and code it. Just make sure you all have on your calendar, or that your PowerSchool folks have on their calendar, maybe a little window of time if there are any changes to that before that deadline, that there's a little bit of time to go in, make any corrections that need to be made. If unfortunately a student did not earn the diploma, for example, that could be changed, that they didn't meet the requirements, and it would be coded appropriately. Hopefully, your expectations are met there for all of your wonderful students. So just keep those two fields in mind. Very, very critical. All right. These extra fields that I mentioned to you, are also important, and they're probably important for you internally for your planning. As you can see, this top one, seeking diploma type, is important for the transcript. That's going to appear on transcripts. And of course, you're going to have work in progress transcripts that you would want to be populated with your correct information for your students if they're seeking a diploma. And so make sure that you also populate that as soon as you know that a student is seeking a diploma. For diploma ordered, again, another field that's important as you're thinking about graduation information for your students and preparing for that along through their journey. This is critical for ordering paper diplomas and has a role in our DOT system where um, principals are doing verifications after all is said and done. So you want everything to line up, and that's the way that's the reason why I point these out, right? So if we're thinking about GPS dashboards, like Van is going to show you in a minute, and exactly how metrics are calculated, those two fields right in the middle, super critical. But those fields sort of sandwiching on the outside there, the diploma type and the diploma order, are also really critical, and you don't want misalignment for those with your expectations. All right, the next slide we have here, let's switch over to high school student success indicator, on track to graduate. For this one, you'll see at the bottom, I'll kind of jump to the bottom of the slide. We still have that seeking diploma type field, right, as something that's important, but maybe in some ways even more important, right up top here, the course codes. You want to make sure at the beginning of the year, you're checking Satchel, you're making sure that your course codes are accurate for those courses that Van has talked with you about that are critical. So the course codes are not entered on the student information page like most of the other data that I'm talking with you about. That's actually going to show up on some pages in PowerSchool called courses and new course if a new course were to be set up. The actual table and field in the PowerSchool database where that's stored is the courses table, and the field is course_number. And the field label that you will typically see in the UI, the user interface in PowerSchool, is actually number. And again, use Satchel to verify those courses. One little note about this, it is a bit difficult for PowerSchool administrators to make changes to course numbers and course codes mid-year. So I highly recommend that everyone really check that at the beginning of the year so that you don't run into issues that are difficult to solve later in the year. All right, now high school success, student success indicator for fifth year success, the employability credential. Let's talk about that. Again, my purple box here in the middle and the big purple arrow showing you what's really, really critical at the end of the day to know in those metrics who earned this. That's going to be your employability credential date and your employability credential earned. And I won't read out the table name to you again, but it's that same extended student table there where some of the diploma information is, where all of the diploma information I've talked with you about is stored. And you can see the field names as well, the EMP_credential_date and the EMP_credential_earned. These are very critical. And in fact, They do need to be accurate before that 180-day deadline. I will also throw in that the Office of Special Education Services also has some of their own reporting deadlines. So be on the lookout for memos from them, where you might even want to have that data in for some of their early reporting purposes a little earlier. I think typically for the earned by the 180 day is still good. But for students who are seeking it, let's talk about that. You want to get that in as early as possible. So this field we have up top is the seeking employability credential. As soon as you know, really as soon as possible in the year that the student is seeking that, go ahead and identify those students and check the box for seeking employability credential. I will also go ahead and remind everyone or let you know if this is not something that you previously were aware of, that for that seeking information, you also want to have the employability credential date projected. Go ahead and fill that out. So that's that same employability credential date field. It's important to fill this out early on, unlike with the diploma earned date, because there's a little bit of a difference in some of the paths for the students who might earn this that you wouldn't normally see with a student who was just diploma seeking and did not have the employability credential on their path. For students seeking the employability credential, we sometimes have students who earn this, and then what's great is that they can actually come back and seek a diploma and earn a diploma. And so this date field is extremely critical. So as soon as you identify that they're seeking it, go ahead and actually put the date with the correct year when they are projected to earn it, should they earn it. And if that changes, obviously you would want to change that information, but that's important for that office to know. And then you'll already have it coded. And if everything goes as you expect, then, hopefully it wouldn't change and it would, everything would go as planned. And then you could just check that they earned the credential once they've earned it. For this last field here, again, this is a little bit extra, but also important as you're thinking about these data. Again, we found that those two key pieces in the middle for accountability and report cards are going to probably be better quality and meeting your standards for data quality if you're thinking about all of these fields. So this last one is this unique student email identifier for orders. Just like with a diploma, there are paper employability credentials. There's actually also a digital employability credential that's issued, but for both of those, and certainly to make sure that the orders are made in a timely manner, this postgraduate student email field needs to be filled out. That should be a personal student email. And you would want to have that filled out as soon as possible so that you're not rushing to get that filled out for them. We recommend, by the way, that not be a district email, but it be a student email that wouldn't expire potentially once the student exits your district. And then finally here, high school student success indicator, 5th year success, adult ed and GED. Here are some critical fields or the critical fields that you need to know about for this. So we have adult ed entry date and exit date. And we've also talked about these adult ed dates in another context in a previous slide. Here we're talking about the 5th year success indicator. And of course, very critical is GED earned. And so for your GED earned, you want that GED earned field to be populated and adult ed graduation date populated. All right, all of these, except for the course numbers, of course, are going to be pieces of data that are entered on the South Carolina Student Information page. Yes, it is true some of your PowerSchool folks have ways that they can import data in batches and things like that, but I just want to make sure everyone knows where you would find this and how it could be entered directly through the UI on the page. So if you go to Compliance, South Carolina Student Information, and then you'll be on the South Carolina Student Information page, and you want to make sure that you're on that tab because there are other tabs on the page. Here are some images to show you what these fields look like on that page. I just happen to have in this example F instead of Z selected for the seeking diploma type for transcript field, but these are just examples, but you can note what the field labels look like and the sections that they're located in. For earned, we have diploma earned and graduation date. Again, really want to make sure that diploma earned information is included because graduation date being populated by itself is not enough for the state to know that student earned a diploma. And then ordering and recognition information down at the bottom. Again, I mentioned those because oftentimes we find that data quality is better for your critical fields for your metrics if you're keeping all of these fields in mind. Employability credential fields look like this. So seeking employability credential, by the way, it does say for transcript, our typical transcript template, as a side note, does not automatically loop that in, but we have some districts do use a script to pull that in, and if they were to, that's what they would use. But just a little side note on that. But in terms of what's really crucial for today, in terms of your metrics for your report cards, remember that employability credential earned checkbox must be checked, and that employability credential date must be accurate. And it is really important that the correct year is showing there, because remember that path for your employability credential students could really vary a little bit. In fact, a bit more in some ways when you're thinking about years than your regular diploma seeking students. And so make sure that that employability credential date field is populated as soon as you know the student is seeking, and that the seeking checkbox is checked as soon as you know they're seeking, and that the correct expected date is populated. Once they earn it, go ahead and check the box for earned. And then pretty straightforward here, but just so you know what they look like, here are those adult ed and GED fields. You have entry date and exit date for adult ed and adult ed graduation date. And then you have GED earned, which is a really critical one, of course, for that 5th year success to know about. And I just have a little screenshot here to show you what Satchel looks like. So if you've heard about Satchel and you haven't seen it before, here is the URL that you can go to right now if you want, even and follow along and check it out. Please do. It's a great way to search for information about courses and check against what you're setting up in PowerSchool. You can export a file with course information if that is easier for you to work with. And again, props to major kudos to Nicole Ivory, who has made this available to us and also who does an amazing job maintaining it so that it stays up to date for you all. All right. We like to also talk about when to code data. And sometimes I will say that sometimes we have recommendations, but there's not necessarily a hard and fast mandate. The hard and fast thing I'd like for everyone to really keep in mind is that your data does need to be accurate, that PowerSchool data, by that 180-day deadline. And this is in the context of what we're discussing today. And this is the data that I'm talking with you about is that PowerSchool data. So keep that in mind. But a little bit about recommendations for how to make sure that you're not sort of scrambling there at the end. So your graduation rate fields, your diploma fields. Good rule of thumb is once you know a student is seeking, if you can get that information earlier on, go ahead and code that. Once you are sure that they've earned it, or pretty sure they're going to, as long as you make sure you have time to make any corrections before that hard deadline, code that. Graduation date, make sure it's accurate once it's determined. Again, if you need to make adjustments, you can, as long as everything is accurate by the deadline. For high school student success indicator, on track to graduate, this one you really want to get right as you're setting up for your next year. So verifying that your course codes are accurate. You could actually start doing sort of an audit, if you will, or a review of the course codes that you have before the next year starts. So even as early as now, so that everything is set up really well for next year. That might be a good effort to undertake so you feel great and confident and on good footing each year. It's a little bit tricky to change those mid-year if that ends up being discovered as a need. Seeking diploma type. Again, once you know that what the student is seeking, code that. If it changes, change it and make sure that you communicate that with whoever is doing the coding in PowerSchool. And similar principle, make sure the data is accurate along. But for your 5th year success, your employability credential related fields, this is probably the one that might have the most nuance in terms of the recommendation and what's required for the needs along. So for the purposes of what we're discussing today for report cards and accountability, again, at the end of the day, the date and that they earned it, very critical that be accurate. But as soon as you know that the student is seeking it, go ahead and put that anticipated date with the correct year, especially, because that's going to be needed for other reasons. And go ahead and include that they're seeking it once you know that. For adult ed and GED or high school equivalency related fields, code those once they're earned. And then, of course, how does the data make it to SCDE? So as we discussed with the cohort data, once the data is entered in PowerSchool and published to EdFi using a page that looks like this, your PowerSchool administrators are very familiar with it, by 7 p.m. Eastern, you can verify that data in Administrator Navigator the next day. I want to specify that if all the publishing completes by 7 p.m., that this is true. If you were to kick off the publishing and it runs a bit later than that, that's when Van might flag to you, hey, you could have another day's worth of lag, and that would be the reason why. But if the data finishes publishing by 7 p.m., then it would be available the next day. What I have done here for you is giving you a little picture. I know it's hard to read, and so it's not intended to necessarily be legible for every word, okay? But this is a visual to show you um, what the field categories look like in the PowerSchool publishing versus what we talked about for cohorts. So for cohorts, we really looked at a smaller chunk. If you're wondering, well, just to make sure that the students in the cohort, it's really just a few of these kind of near the top, like we discussed last time. But as we talk about all the different fields that are important for accountability, and we add to that list, you're going to see where the other publishing categories come into play for your PowerSchool folks. Fortunately, those can be scheduled. And so the recommendation here is that your PowerSchool administrator go in and set up a regular publishing schedule that makes sense for your district. That could be daily publishing that's staggered. And that's what I would recommend to have the freshest data, but it's not a publish all. We are at a place where we have a really great functionality just to publish changes. So once your data has what I would call your base data has been published at the beginning of the year, which takes a little bit longer to get going, as changes come through, those can be sent up to EdFi. So that can be scheduled. If anybody is still doing a publish all, you don't need to do that anymore. And actually, that could cause you more delays. So please don't do that. Do a publish changes, schedule it. And you'll note here that I have not highlighted, I'll read these for you because they're hard to read, the student contacts, discipline, and attendance. Those are also important. Oftentimes our PowerSchool administrators do have those scheduled just right up in line with everything else. But for the fields that we're talking about today, I've highlighted what would be critical. And so that might just be good to know if you needed to go back and make any changes for any particular reason. And being a little bit more specific with checking and making sure that your data is publishing. One thing that some really districts that are really good at this are doing that they've told us is they just do some spot checks. And that's a great practice because a spot check can be pretty quick and it can kind of let you know, hey, it looks like things are going well and smooth sailing and we can move forward business as usual. So a way to do a spot check for this data would be to select a student whose values you wish to verify as published or submitted. You're going to go to that student's publishing page. The way to get to that in PowerSchool is data exchange and then publishing. And there's a little green check mark that's going to show you some stuff that may or may not look confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you. It's not as bad as it looks. And our PowerSchool administrators are really great at accessing this. So you can click that green check mark and look at something called JSON. Some people say JSON, either way. And it basically just looks like some text with a little bit of punctuation around it. What these are just these key value pairs. It basically is a field and a value, right? So these fields are labeled according to EdFi speak, EdFi lingo. And so I'll break some of that down for you and show you how to break it down if you need to. So something like diploma type descriptor is an EdFi field, if you will. And then you've got the data that's being sent up for that based on what's stored in PowerSchool. Sometimes it looks exactly like the value that you would see in PowerSchool, and sometimes it looks a little different. We will be sharing with you guys a new mapping document. I have a slide for you in a second that we'll look at to show you how to navigate it. And that would help you do a little Control F, Control Find Search for fields that you would recognize in PowerSchool and see, okay, where are those in EdFi? So what you can check here, for example, is, okay, well, for diploma, this diploma type descriptor, what value is being sent up? So in this particular case, this student has a diploma award date currently showing as June 1st, 2026. That could be one that was coded, or it could be a default based on other student information, but the district would want to make sure that that was accurate before all was said and done. And then you're also going to see there that the diploma earned is pending. So it's showing that value going up. Later on, if the student earns their diploma, what you would see is something like this. You would see for that descriptor the letter F if it's a regular high school diploma. And maybe the district went in and changed that diploma award date to the date that you see here. So in this case, the example is May 28th, 2026. Now, this is just one example. We actually looked at quite a few fields today. So I didn't want to give you a slide like this for every single one, but rather give you the tools to find this kind of information for all of those fields. So a quick cheat sheet for you here is that, let me go back to the previous slide, these subcategories. So in my example here, my subcategory is student academic records in blue in this little picture, and it's under this big transcripts category on that student publishing page. The three subcategories for the data that we've talked about today that you would want to look for are student demographics, student academic records, and student course transcript. And the way to really dial in, well, which of these do I need if I want to spot check for a particular data point? That's where our mapping doc can really come in handy that we'll make available to you. So you can kind of go click in these, and you might be able to honestly figure things out just by looking and seeing what's there. But if you want to be really sure, you could also use our document to say, well, Wendy gave me the exact PowerSchool field name, and it's diploma earn code. So I can do a little Control F, plug in diploma earn code, and some things it's going to lead you right to that in the mapping doc. And so what I've done is zoomed in here for you on 3 columns that you would want to pay attention to. So you have the SIS, or the Student Information System, or PowerSchool table dot column. You have the SIS source logic that gives you a little bit of information about, well, how is data being sent up? Okay, so in this case, it's pretty straightforward. If that value stored is F, then the code value for the Ed5 field is F. And then in blue down here, the API endpoint, there's some other detail here. It's a concatenated formula. Basically, what that means is you've got the endpoint student academic records, and then some other Ed5 entity information that might be valuable to help you find in the JSON that we looked at here, right? All of this text. You might need to look for the word diplomas or the word diploma type descriptor, as we see right here. And so that mapping document, for those who might be interested or wanting to do that, would help you zoom in on those particular specifics, okay? So that's how you would do it. And again, sometimes it's actually pretty easy to look at the JSON and kind of glean what you need to know, but we want to give you all the tools to find what you need. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Van. I'll stop sharing so he can talk with you about verifying your data.
Thanks, Wendy. I think Wendy's piece there really speaks to why it's important for, in some cases, you to have multiple folks from your district on the call, depending on the size of your district, right? She just went into the super technical details here about how these processes work and what has to be coded. And there's should be multiple phases to what you're looking at here in your districts. As a note, I will be stepping out as soon as this section ends. I'll be turning it over to Era, and then it'll go, well, I'll turn my part over to Era, and then Wendy will discuss a little bit more with you, and then Era will close us out. But we look at the next phase of this is really verifying your data. How do we know that what you have published and made it us? And the source for that is going to be Admin Navigator. We talked about this last time. If you don't have Admin Navigator, please scan the QR code. But our partners at the Palmetto Data Collaborative have a list there of who all uses it and how they use it, or who has access to it in your district. This is a tool, Admin Navigator, that we've spent about 3 years building out with Education Oversight Committee and the Palmetto Data Collaborative. But the first place we want to go is the OnTrack and CCR Readiness Dashboard. We covered this last time, but I just want to hit a few points of it here. If you go to the OnTrack and College and Career Readiness Dashboard, you're going to see all kinds of information within the Admin Navigator. You're going to see information on, at a quick glance, your total number of students, CCR, but also where we're focused today, which is OnTrack. And we're going to cover how you set up your filters to do that. In your filter pane, you just want to select 25, 26 as your school year. Select your district, select your school name, select your cohort year, And the key part of this is always apply filters. Okay. Once you've clicked all apply filters, just go back and collapse those filters. Now, the reason I do that is to get a better view of all the data. And I will go back 1 second here, just in case anybody didn't get that link. The link there for Admin Navigator is just portal.edanalytics.app. Okay, so please make sure you've had a chance to load that and bookmark it in case you haven't already done so. So you go through, you apply your filters that you think are appropriate for what you're looking at today, collapse those filters, and you get a bit larger view of the data. And the first two things I want to draw your attention to here are that total number of students that we're looking at, as well as the on-track percentage. We're going to be talking about college career readiness next month. If we go to the table to the right, we can get a breakdown by high school, broken down also by the 9GR. So we can see we've got that school name on the left. Third column tells us the 9GR. Fourth column tells us the number of students in that specific 9GR for that high school. And the fifth column tells us the percentage who are on track. Now, I will say, we should not expect in every case for that number to be where it should be today. Data does update nightly. Wendy already covered that, right? But sometimes we don't award credits until the end of the year in many cases, right? So we should not expect that every single student in a cohort should be on track today, because they will need to earn the credits required for graduation in order to be considered to be on track. Below that, you've got a table. That table includes student information, and this is critical. We want to be able to look at the student information, see which school they're in, and see what their on-track status is. So this student table is clear in its presentation of exactly who is included in the cohort and what their on-track status is, which allows for a deeper dive into the students and addressing specific needs. And I should be clear on this part. That allows you to fix data errors that may be occurring, but also address student level needs at the school level as well. You can export that information. If you go to that top right-hand corner of that graph, or really any graph, you can export the information. But the 3 dots there at the top allow you to download. So you click those 3 dots, you select download. The download presents you with a few different options to choose from. There's 4 different two CSV options, 2 Excel options, and an image option. You should choose the one that works best for you. But a brief note about file layout. If you're choosing CSV, it's going to be multiple rows per student, 1 for each metric in the dashboard. If you're choosing a pivoted CSV, you get 1 row per student, but 43 columns. Okay. If you're doing export to Excel, multiple rows per student. If you're doing export to pivot Excel, you get 46 columns, 1 row per student. Now, one thing that we know is an issue and that we're addressing is that there are differences in how our districts define dual enrollment courses and how they count towards high school graduation. Each district should have their own plan for that worked out in their agreements with their partners. We're working to determine the best way to accurately represent that for on-track purposes, given that challenge. Again, 2 districts could have a very different way of counting a specific dual enrollment course towards graduation. That issue is obviously a school report card issue, and it's presenting itself in the Admin Navigator tables. We're going to communicate any coding requirements by Friday, February 27th, so you can be clear on what needs to be coded in order to ensure your dual enrollment courses are showing up correctly. This dashboard there only looks at whether or not a student is included in the cohort and whether or not they're on track in years 1 through 3. You might want to see some more information, and to do that, especially if you want to look at grad rate or 5th-year student success, we can go to a different dashboard called the metrics dashboard. The way to get that metrics dashboard is you first open up your filters again. And you can see I've kind of highlighted those. There's some arrows, a little teal arrow and a big navy arrow at the bottom. That just opens up the key screens we want to toggle between here. And so what I'd want to do there is I would want to go to the metrics dashboard down there at the bottom. Okay. And then we will then click on our filters that we want to go through again: school year, LEA name, school name, metric category, high school student success, and we apply the filters, and we can collapse those filters. The next step we do is we get a view. We've got a district view of data, we've got a school view of data, and we got a student view of data. One thing I want to draw your attention to is the default view is the district view. That's not necessarily the view you want to look at for accountability purposes. So if you click school view, which is the next slide, you're going to see it broken down by school. You'll see the metric name, So on graduating on time, on track to graduate, 5th-year student success. You'll see what school year we're looking at. You'll see the metric category for the report card. You'll see the value, and you'll see your denominator. In addition, you can click the student view, and you're going to get exactly which students are showing up and what their status is. You can see what the metric name is, what the metric value is. Again, that allows you to see if you've got a student-specific data issue, but also to go in and address student level needs. As Wendy mentioned, please make sure updates are completed by 7 p.m. for them to show up the next day. We are running parallel tests all spring to verify that EA and SCDE business rules are aligned. The data is going to remain in flux until June 15th or whenever you begin PowerSchool rollover. The other part I want to highlight here is that our previous process was to provide you with a cohort or a base file via ADT to communicate which students districts should expect to be included in their 4-year cohort. But we are now using Admin Navigator to communicate which students are included in your cohort. In addition, we're aware that in previous years, you could see who was no longer included in your cohort. Now you can only see the students who are included in your cohort. We're aware of the request to bring back that functionality, and we're working to see if we can, but it's not available at this time. I'm going to turn it back to Wendy, and Wendy's going to talk about resolving potential errors. I'm going to step away to go to my next presentation, but then it's going to Era, and Era will do the part that I normally do as we close this out. So back to Wendy.
All right, thank you, Van. Everybody, bear with me just a second as I share screen. All right, resolving potential issues. So as we discussed last time, and as Van has also mentioned, I think working with a few people who can help you with various pieces of this is really important. And we might have some PowerSchool folks on the call who really are in PowerSchool a lot. We may have some folks who are not. And so I would definitely recommend if you are not a PowerSchool administrator, definitely make sure you connect with your PowerSchool administrator. If you believe that there is an issue that needs to be resolved. There are some quick things that can be checked. So one of those can just be sort of a spot checking of various data points. Sometimes the trickiest thing when dealing with a perceived issue or real issue, you know, that starts as a perceived issue, can be just sort of homing in on what exactly is the data that we're talking about here, right? So this is where it would really be great to try to say, well, here's the issue and here is the field or the data point that this seems to be about. What your PowerSchool administrators are really good at and what they're going to be able to help you do is to say, well, okay, in PowerSchool speak, and also perhaps even using some of the slides that we're making available for this presentation, we can home in on the crucial element that we need to check. So that would be a first easy thing to check if you see something that seems off to you. So you can, you or your PowerSchool administrator could go in, check to make sure that the data for those data points is publishing, that it's publishing as expected. And oftentimes what that might highlight as well is, you know, is there data that's actually missing, or maybe the data, there needs to be a little bit of data cleaning upon entry. We'll talk here in a second about level data and how that can help with that piece. But I would definitely recommend starting with, okay, which data elements are we talking about? And then use what we discussed in the previous slides to do some spot checking. If it's discovered in doing that, that for some reason a student isn't publishing at all, their data is just not coming up at all, that is actually a really easy fix. And so what you would want to do is make sure you go to this exclude this student from Ed5 publishing field and make sure that that's set to no. This should default and does default in most cases to exactly what it should be, which is for your students enrolled in the current year to be sending their data up to Ed5. There are reasons why you might use this to do some data cleaning throughout the year. if you needed to. You might be wondering, why would we ever exclude a student from Ed5 publishing in the current year? Usually that's just used for if something is identified by you or by the state that needs some cleaning. So it can be handy, but it should default for all of your students with a current enrollment, including transfer students, to include them, meaning no, they are not excluded. This field actually is going to be relabeled to make it really clear that if it's set to yes, that they would actually be taken out of your system data. So just a heads up that that's coming. We'll message that out, and we're also going to be possibly putting it on a different page based on some district feedback to make life easier for you all. But that's a thing to check. One thing that we've found is that if districts use third-party systems to enroll students, then if they are transferred in later in the year, that might not play nice with this field. For things like PowerSchool enrollment that are actually PowerSchool products that might be used to do that in a different way than others might do their enrollments in PowerSchool. We have worked with PowerSchool to make sure that it does play nice with this field. So that should be working properly. But if you use some sort of third-party software and you find that this is not defaulting appropriately, definitely put in a ticket with PowerSchool to let them know, let us know, and definitely set this appropriately for all of your transfer students as well. If all else fails, you can reach out for help, and we actually definitely recommend some PowerSchool support cases if there's something on the PowerSchool side that you feel you just can't quite get it resolved, right? Or something that seems off that is not clearly explainable the way that you're seeing it, or that you think requires some PowerSchool support. So your tech coordinators at PowerSchool, which would be probably your lead PowerSchool administrators, they're able to put in a case, they get a case number. We actually help track those at SCDE. Our team does a lot of work with PowerSchool. If we see trends and tickets and things like that, that can sometimes be an escalation. So definitely feel free to reach out to us if something's not getting swift attention and you believe it should. Please reach out to this email address you see here at the bottom for our data management team, powerschool@ed.sc.gov, and we will help with escalations if needed. We also help to look for trends in case a development ticket needs to come out of that. And PowerSchool has done some amazing work over the past year to make things run as smoothly as possible for everybody for your data submission to the state. If you have questions about Administrator Navigator, something seems a little amiss there to you, and again, if it's not a data quality issue that you can find, or you're just not sure, you need help troubleshooting, submit a ticket to Education Analytics, and this is a URL here that you can use to get that set up. Again, if you want to loop us in on that ticket for any reason, please feel free to do that. And right now, you could just use that same data management team email. We're trying to come up with some better systems internally to bring in those types of escalations and things, but that would work for now. All right, and again, there are some ways to just be really, really proactive upon data entry and checking along and along. So level data validations are really helpful to make sure that when the data goes in, if something isn't quite right, you get a red, yellow, or green flag in many cases. There are also validation report lists that we have set up in Level Data with you all. And I think every district is using Level Data now. So definitely use that resource. Many districts that are really successful in having clean data by the deadline and not having to worry right at the end, they really have a process for checking those level data validations and informational lists throughout the year. It's a part of their workflow. So if that's something that you haven't considered, I would definitely consider it. It might take a minute to change a workflow and really include that as part of your day-to-day, but that would be hugely valuable. And we definitely do have some validations that are helpful for the fields that we've talked about today. So I would recommend looking at this validation prioritization list, which is linked to here, and we'll make that link available to you. And you can again, that I love that ability to do a control F, right? A little control F, use a word or a term that's familiar to you. So maybe something like, I don't know, it has to do with diploma. And you think, well, I don't know what the exact field name is, but I know diploma. And if you type that in, you'll see all kinds of validations that have to do with fields that might have to do with diploma. Even better if you actually know the field label or the field name, you might get better search results. And you can certainly use that list to filter and find what you need. Satchel, just another reminder to check those course codes as you're setting up for the coming year. You'll be on sure footing each year if that's a part of your workflow. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Era to talk with you guys about some planning time.
All right. I was a little nervous. My microphone was not going to work there for a second, but it looks like we are in business. So my turn to share. Okay. So we have covered lots of information today. You have gone over basic definitions, taking you through that manual about cohorts, all the information from the accountability manual and how those pieces are pulled. Then Wendy did a fantastic job walking you through what to code, when and where with screenshots and information, and then going beyond that with how to check that with what we're pulling in education analytics and how to check those errors on the backside in PowerSchool. So lots of information today. That means that you have a lot that you have to think about how you're going to communicate and how you're going to act on it and move it from a district level piece of information to something that your schools can act on and work to get the information the way that you want it to be ultimately as it goes into those report cards. So now we wanted to give you some planning time. It's not going to be enough time to plan like a professional learning session on what your schools need to do, but just enough time to really think through what you've absorbed today and a little bit of a plan, what your priorities are going to be, things that you know, people that you need to meet with, what you want to address with them. So we're going to set the timer for 5 minutes just to give you some time to pull up that to-do list or to start putting something on your calendar or crafting some emails, whatever it might need to be, or maybe you're going to start pulling down some files. But I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes and then we will rejoin you. And we'll also be looking at some of those Q&A questions during that time. Thank you so much. Timer set for 5 minutes. We are coming down to the last few seconds on my timer. So just giving you a warning, we're coming back to the screen. All right, well, hopefully that gave you a little bit of time carved out in your day to just start thinking about how you want to communicate this information. To your audience, who it needs to be communicated to, when you're going to communicate it, and how you plan to follow up. I do apologize. I had not realized that the slides continued to flow down, or I would have had those up for you earlier. But this is a nice little check then to say what you were thinking about. And did you think about who you wanted your audience to be, how you were going to communicate it, when you're going to communicate it, and how are you going to follow up? And follow up, I think, is your big piece here. You've looked today and seen several ways to go in and check these things. So maybe thinking about putting some check-in point dates on your calendar there to say, okay, I communicated it, I set the expectations, and now here's the date that I'm going to follow up. And I'm sure there'll be a few follow-up dates. So next steps, of course, we are just in the early phases here. We've talked to you about cohorts. We have talked to you about now your high school student success indicator. And our next topic on March the 18th and the 19th are going to be college and career readiness. So we have some more professional development coming up. We will get out those links about 1 week prior to the session. Then you can see after college and career readiness, we're going to have students not tested. We're not quite sure what our next topic is going to be for topic number 5, but you're going to have a survey here at the end and can continue giving us some valuable information as we plan for those sessions. And then for our last topic, general assistance, before that June 15th or really end of your day on June 14th deadline. Included today, these resources, accountability manual, the SIS data manual, both of those pieces really bookend everything that was talked about today. We have that flow chart. There is a data flow diagram. So we'll have the slide deck for that. You can go back through the slides there. Another link to level data validations. You have your cohort maintenance information with different pieces about the manuals and the memos. And then we'll continue to do some more updates with the mapping document that has been in progress. We've shared a little bit about that at TAR, and that's going to be linked in here as we have these documents ready. And then the accountability-oriented mapping document. So again, those pieces are in progress, and we will have them linked as we have them ready for you, continuing to bring you this information during these trainings. So these slides will be coming out. We've got a little bit of time that we need to put in to just clean up the recording and make sure that everything looks great. We will have the slides for you. We'll have the recording for you. And also, I know people have said, how can we get to this after? What if we didn't get the email? It is just my 3rd day, but I am going to be getting website access and then figuring a way to put this information in the website for you and make it accessible as well. So that's the plan. It's coming up. We've got sessions coming. We've got key documents coming. But hopefully doing these things just a little chunk at a time can let you have just some focus, essentially little sprints on parts of the work as you work back with your folks. So now is that time. Please complete an evaluation of the session using the QR code that we have here available for you on the screen. We would very, very much appreciate that. So go ahead and scan that. What I'm going to do, I will pop over to the next slide that's going to talk about some key takeaways, and then I can even come back to this just for anyone who may have not gotten that scan to work. But I want to pause for about 10 seconds, let that scan work, get these lights to turn back on, and then I'll take you to some final takeaways. All right, so key takeaways. Big pieces from today: graduation rate and high school student success indicators. Use cohort data. So having those cohorts be correct is the first step in all the other metrics working correctly for you. So go back through those resources and make correct cohorts a key priority for accountability. We know these indicators can account for up to 36% of your report card rating, which is a big old chunk of that report card rating. And then you know now about using that admin navigator to check for your student level data. You can look at it from a school level, you can look at it from a student level, and I'm sure there will be several folks that are a part of your team that support you either at the school level or the district level who are going to be eagerly awaiting seeing those files and working through where things are so they can have their data correct if it is not where it's supposed to be right now. As you identify potential errors, you should lead your schools through the process processes outlined today to have that data be accurate. Remember, you've got all that information from Wendy about working through those things in PowerSchool. And then once they're worked through in PowerSchool, you should see those things then reflected essentially the next day if they were made before 7 p.m. in your admin navigator screen. You also have our contact information. Van was who started us off today. He's our Chief Research Officer. I'm Era Roberts, joining from being a District Testing Accountability Coordinator. And we have, of course, Wendy Stevens, who really knows that data management side of things. So as I shared, I'm going to pop that slide back up for your exit survey. And we thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great one, everyone. We look forward to seeing your feedback.